Under the bright lights of television, Brandi Passante always seemed calm, composed, and in control. The woman who could outthink a room full of men, outbid seasoned hustlers, and smile while doing it. To millions of fans, she was the quick-witted half of Storage Wars, the one who balanced the chaos with a roll of her eyes and a sharp line that always landed at just the right moment. But fame, like every locked storage unit, hides more than it reveals. Behind that easy confidence was a woman carrying stories that never made it into the episodes, memories that the cameras would never dare capture. The world saw the treasure hunter. Few ever noticed the survivor. Before the cheering crowds and production crews, Brandi's world was far smaller and much harder. She had known what it felt like to be underestimated long before she ever faced a rival bidder. She had learned early that toughness isn't inherited, it's earned. One bruise, one disappointment, one hard-won victory at a time. The irony was cruel. The show that made her famous thrived on forgotten things, on the pieces of other people's lives left behind in metal boxes. And in a way, Brandi's own story was built the same way, from fragments and leftovers that she refused to let define her. Every choice, every risk, every scar became part of her own private collection. When audiences tuned in each week, they thought they were watching a competition about money. What they were really seeing was resilience, a woman who had already fought far tougher battles than the ones played for entertainment. They just didn't know it yet. Because when the cameras stopped rolling, when the applause faded and the studio lights went dark, Brandi Passante faced a very different kind of silence, the kind that forces you to look at yourself and ask who you really are when no one's watching. That silence would change everything. Long before anyone knew her name, Brandi Passante was just another kid growing up under the wide, sunburned sky of Harris County, Texas. Born on May 16, 1980, she came into a world that was equal parts warmth and wildness, the kind of childhood where scraped knees were daily trophies and you learned to stand your ground before you learned to drive. She grew up surrounded by brothers, a lone girl in a house full of noise, competition, and rough edges. She would later laugh about it, saying her brothers loved to beat the crap out of me, but she always added that it was the best kind of training life could give her. That house, that chaos, those long afternoons of proving herself, they built the armor she would one day wear in a business where weakness was blood in the water. Even as a child, Brandi was restless. She felt it in her bones, that tug of something bigger, calling her beyond the edge of her small-town life. She once admitted she'd sometimes stare at her reflection and wonder if she even belonged in her own family, half joking that she must have been adopted because she always thought so differently. It wasn't rebellion. It was a sense that she was meant for something else, something she couldn't yet name. Underneath her shyness was a spark, one that showed itself whenever she stepped onto a softball field. For 9 years, she threw herself into the game with fierce precision. There, the timid girl disappeared. In her place stood someone driven, sharp, unafraid of a fastball coming straight at her. That competitive streak, that refusal to back down, would follow her through every chapter of her life. People often mistook her quietness for attitude. As she once laughed, "I wasn't giving dirty looks, I was just too shy to smile." But that quietness hid the watchfulness of a future businesswoman, someone who studied people, learned their patterns, and understood the value of patience before striking. In her teenage years, while others dreamed of escaping Texas for fame or love, Brandi's dreams were simpler, but no less ambitious. She wanted to create, to build something that was hers. For a while, she imagined becoming a chef, working in the rhythm of a kitchen, where chaos somehow became order. But life had other plans, messier, louder, and far more unpredictable than any recipe could prepare her for. By the time she reached adulthood, she had learned that independence was both a gift and a burden. No one was coming to rescue her. If she wanted a different life, she'd have to carve it out herself. That fire, the one lit in a Texas backyard, would burn through heartbreak, humiliation, and fame. It would carry her from anonymity to the glare of television lights. And soon, that same fire would lead her straight into the path of the man who would change everything, for better and for worse. By the late 90s, Brandi's dreams were modest ones. She wanted a steady job, a little freedom, and the satisfaction of standing on her own feet. In 1999, that path led her to a carpet cleaning company in California. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. And it was there, among hoses and stain removers, that she met the man who would define so much of her next 2 decades, Jared Scholes. He was her supervisor back then, full of energy, charm, and the kind of persistence that bordered on reckless confidence. Brandi would later laugh that he just wore me down. He flirted constantly, cracked jokes that weren't always funny, and somehow managed to make her roll her eyes while smiling at the same time. Jared, for his part, told the story differently. He claimed she was the one who chased him. It became one of those running jokes between them, 2 versions of the same story, told with affection and a hint of competition, the kind of playful banter that later became their signature on national television. But in those early days, they were just 2 young people trying to find direction. What started as teasing at work turned into late-night conversations, and those conversations turned into something real. They balanced each other. He was impulsive and loud, she was quiet and measured. Together, they made sense. They didn't know it then, but that strange chemistry, that mix of love and exasperation, would one day make them one of the most recognizable couples on cable television. Before fame, before the cameras, there were bills to pay, cheap dinners, and long drives home. They shared small dreams, a house, a business, a family. It wasn't about glamour, it was about survival. But sometimes survival builds stronger bonds than success ever could. When Brandi talked about those early years later in life, she never painted them as romantic or easy. They struggled, they argued. They learned to depend on each other, not because they were perfect, but because no one else was coming to help. In that humble start, between the work trucks and cleaning supplies, a partnership was born. Not the kind built on fairy tales or scripted drama, but one forged in real life, where love often arrives disguised as persistence. Soon that partnership would grow beyond 2 people just trying to make ends meet. It would evolve into a family, a business, and eventually a brand. But every story of success has its beginning, and Brandi's began in a carpet cleaning shop, with a stubborn boss who wouldn't take no for an answer, and a young woman who had no idea the world was already watching. Love for Brandi Passante didn't come wrapped in perfection. It came in work clothes, with laughter and arguments in equal measure. By the early 2000s, she and Jared had built a life together. Messy, unpredictable, but theirs. They never officially married, but that never seemed to matter. What held them together wasn't a ring. It was shared struggle, shared dreams, and eventually shared children. Their son Cameron came first, followed by their daughter Peyton. Like every parent, Brandi entered motherhood with hope, but life, as it often does, had other plans. When Peyton was born, doctors delivered news that sent her world into freefall. Her baby was deaf and had a cleft palate. Before she was even 2 months old, Peyton underwent her first surgery. Brandi waited in the sterile quiet of a hospital hallway, counting seconds like hours, praying for a sound, any sound, to reach her daughter's ears. The surgery worked. Peyton could hear, but recovery was long, and speech therapy became part of their daily lives for years. Through every appointment, every late-night worry, Brandi stood like steel. She never wanted her daughter to see fear in her eyes. When Peyton finally joined her school's cheer squad, shouting and laughing among her teammates, Brandi called it a sound I'll never take for granted. Cameron's journey had its own trials. During a routine checkup, doctors found a mass near his kidney. For 3 long months, Brandi practically lived at the Children's Hospital of Orange County, sleeping in waiting rooms, holding his hand, whispering stories just to keep his mind away from fear. The experience aged her, but it also clarified what really mattered. Fame, money, ambition, all of it meant nothing if she couldn't keep her children safe. Motherhood changed Brandi, and not in the ways people expected. She had imagined she'd love the stillness, the simple rhythm of home life. But after years of working, the quiet became suffocating. She adored her kids but missed herself, the part that thrived on challenge, on creating something of her own. Being a stay-at-home mom, she once admitted, made me feel invisible. She needed purpose again. That hunger, that spark that had lived in her since Texas, started whispering again, there's more out there. So when Jared suggested he might try his hand in the mortgage business, she supported him. But deep down, she was already looking for her own road back to independence. She didn't yet know what form it would take, only that she wasn't built for silence. Life, as if listening, soon handed her something entirely unexpected, a second chance at work, a new challenge, and an introduction to a world that would change everything she thought she knew about luck,
fame, and herself. It all began with a pile of other people's forgotten things and the courage to take a chance on them. It started as a favor, a quick visit to a storage auction with Jared's aunt. But the moment Brandi heard the chant of the auctioneer, something inside her sparked. Rows of lockers filled with forgotten lives, each one a gamble, a story waiting to be rediscovered. They began buying small units, cleaning, sorting, reselling. One day, inside a dusty box, Brandi found an old jewelry piece worth much more than they'd paid. That tiny win felt like a miracle.
Soon, now and then, their thrift store was born, cluttered, chaotic, and full of second chances. Then, fate walked through the door. A TV producer scouting characters for a new reality show stopped by. The idea? People bidding on abandoned storage units. The title? Storage Wars. Brandi hesitated. She wasn't made for cameras, or so she thought. But within months, the quiet Texas girl became a fan favorite, the steady hand in a room full of chaos. She didn't just find treasures in storage lockers, she found them in herself. When Storage Wars hit the air, viewers instantly noticed Brandi. While others shouted and swaggered, she stayed calm, sharp eyes, quiet confidence, a smirk that said she'd already done the math. She wasn't just Jared's partner, she was the one keeping him from bidding their savings away. Audiences loved the contrast. Jared brought chaos, Brandi brought clarity. Together, they were lightning in a bottle, the perfect balance of humor and tension. But behind the easy banter was a woman still learning to believe she belonged there. Fame came fast and it came loud. Critics called her the heart of the show. Fans called her Queen of the Locker. But Brandi saw herself differently. A mom trying to make ends meet, figuring out how to stay grounded while strangers debated her every move online. What made her stand out wasn't attitude or beauty, it was authenticity. In a world built on bluffing, she never pretended to be anything she wasn't. With fame came noise, the kind that doesn't fade when the cameras do. For Brandi, sudden stardom meant strangers knowing her face, her name, her family. Fans wanted photos, tabloids wanted headlines, and somewhere in between, privacy quietly disappeared. In 2012, her strength was tested in a way no reality show could prepare her for. A hacker posted stolen, fabricated photos of her online, turning a cruel invasion into public humiliation. Instead of hiding, Brandi fought back, filing a lawsuit, facing the press, and demanding accountability. She won, not just the case, but her dignity. Still, the damage lingered. Every scroll through social media carried comments dissecting her looks, her voice, her body. Some nights she read them, most nights she didn't. The cameras caught her smile, never the exhaustion behind it. Fame had opened doors, yes, but it had also built walls around her peace. At first glance, Brandi and Jared seemed unshakable, partners in love, business, and television fame. But behind the playful bickering that fans adored, something fragile was forming. Success had amplified everything: the laughter, the tension, the distance. When their spin-off, Brandi and Jared, Married to the Job, premiered, it was meant to celebrate their growing empire. Instead, it exposed the strain holding it together. The pressure of filming, parenting, and running a store began to wear thin. Arguments turned sharper, silences lasted longer. What audiences thought were harmless jokes were at times quiet cries for space. Brandi kept her composure, always professional, always polite, but she could feel the partnership that built her dream slowly slipping away. The empire they'd built on forgotten treasures was starting to crumble from within. By 2018, the silence between Brandi and Jared had become louder than any argument. After nearly 2 decades together, the partnership that once fueled their rise was falling apart. When Storage Wars returned in 2020, fans noticed the shift immediately. They were no longer a team. Brandi confirmed the truth quietly, without bitterness. They had separated years earlier, but she'd chosen to keep it private, hoping time might heal what success had strained. It didn't. Then, in 2021, the world learned of a darker chapter, a confrontation that ended with Jared facing a charge for domestic violence. Through it all, Brandi remained silent, refusing to trade pain for publicity. She focused on her children, her work, and the steady rebuilding of her peace. The woman who once fought for lockers was now fighting for herself. In the quiet that followed her breakup, Brandi rediscovered something she hadn't heard in years: her own voice. For the first time, she was no longer half of a duo, no longer the balance to someone else's chaos. When Storage Wars returned, she stepped into the room alone, calm, centered, and sharper than ever. Fans noticed the difference immediately. Her confidence had changed. The jokes were still quick, the smirk still there, but the woman behind them had evolved. She wasn't just bidding on lockers anymore, she was bidding on her freedom. Outside television, she found a new outlet, a podcast called Happening Now with Hammer. It wasn't scripted or polished, just raw conversations filled with humor, honesty, and a touch of sarcasm. Brandi spoke openly about motherhood, loneliness, and learning to rebuild after heartbreak.
There was no trace of bitterness, only a steady, grounded strength. After years of playing a role beside someone else, she was finally playing herself. Love came back into Brandi's life quietly, without cameras, drama, or headlines. After years of rebuilding herself, she met Clifford Beaver, a man far from the chaos of television. There were no reality show scripts, no staged arguments, just two people who'd both known heartbreak and decided to choose peace instead. Fans began noticing the glow in her photos, the laughter that had returned to her eyes. On social media, she shared glimpses of this new chapter: dinners, quiet smiles, moments that spoke louder than any interview ever could. With Clifford, love didn't demand performance, it offered safety. For the first time, Brandi didn't have to prove she was strong. She could simply be. And in that stillness, she found something she had long been searching for: happiness that didn't need an audience. Fame had given Brandi everything she once thought she wanted: recognition, stability, and a career that could support her children. But as the years went on, she began to see the trade-off clearly. Every smile came with scrutiny, every success with whispers, every public moment with judgment. Storage Wars had turned her into a household name, but it had also left her exposed in ways few understood. Online forums debated her appearance, gossip sites speculated about her love life, and fans expected her to play the same version of herself forever. The truth was simpler: she was just trying to keep her balance. Money had never been the goal, yet it became part of the burden. Her earnings grew from just a few $1,000s per episode to well over $10,000, and her thrift store's name became a brand. But wealth, she realized, didn't buy silence. It didn't heal heartbreak or fill the empty spaces fame had carved inside her. There were days when she missed the simplicity of her old life: dusty boxes, long drives, the thrill of finding something forgotten. Because at least back then, she was invisible. Now, every step forward meant being watched, measured, and misunderstood. Still, she didn't resent what she'd built. She just learned to live with its price. Fame wasn't freedom, it was a kind of survival. And surviving, she knew, was something she'd always been good at. Through every setback, Brandi did what she had always done. She endured. When others would have disappeared, she stayed. Not for fame, not for validation, but because she refused to let her story be written by anyone else. Fans saw it too. Over time, her audience evolved from casual viewers to loyal supporters, people who had watched her fall, struggle, and rise again with quiet dignity. She became something far more powerful than a reality TV personality. She became a symbol of resilience. Women wrote to her thanking her for showing that independence after heartbreak was possible. Single mothers saw strength in her laughter, courage in her calm. And while she rarely spoke of herself as an inspiration, she carried that role with grace. Her humor became her shield, her warmth her defense. Even when interviews prodded for drama, she steered the conversation towards self-worth and growth. She'd learned that strength wasn't loud, it was the ability to keep standing when no one expected you to. Brandi Passante had once been known for finding treasures in other people's storage lockers. But the greatest discovery she ever made wasn't made of gold or silver. It was the realization that she herself was the treasure worth saving. There's a quiet kind of power in the way Brandi Passante carries herself now. No longer defined by a partnership, a show, or the opinions of strangers, she stands as her own story, still unfolding, still resilient. From a shy Texas girl who once doubted she belonged anywhere, to a woman who built an empire out of forgotten things, Her journey has never been about perfection. It's been about persistence. Every chapter, love, loss, fame, heartbreak, shaped her into someone unshakably real. When she walks into an auction today, the cameras don't define her, her confidence does. She's been underestimated, misjudged, and written off, yet here she is, still bidding, still building, still standing. And maybe that's the lesson her story leaves behind. That life isn't about what we win or lose, but what we choose to keep. For years, Brandi searched through other people's discarded memories, looking for something valuable. But somewhere along the way, she found the most priceless thing of all, herself. Her story doesn't end with fame or fortune. It ends beautifully, quietly, with peace. And for Brandi Passante, that's the greatest treasure she's ever found.